Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's presentation is called Getting Sketchy with It. There will be no interpretive dance moves going on. But we're just gonna cover sketches and, you know, whether you've been with SOLIDWORKS for a long time or just new, I think everyone can get something out of this. A lot of times enhancements have been made over the years and you either know about them or haven't implemented them in your practices, or you missed that enhancement. So hopefully we'll be covering some of those. And we have 4 presenters today, myself, Ami Megani, and then we've got Tim Strange, Shivani Patel, and Steve Darcy. All of us office out of Texas, but we have over 100 technical resources all over the US. So before we get into the sketch demonstration, I just wanted to remind you of our design from home options. We have a dedicated website for that, and the URL is on your screen. But we talk about, you know, license borrowing and VPN connection considerations, you know, 3D printer maintenance issues. We know that some offices are opening up and some are not open yet, so we just wanted to make sure that you knew where you can get some of that information. And of course, you can contact our technical staff for, you know, more details. Okay, so I'm gonna jump right in. Let me share my, my SOLIDWORKS screen. Okay, so I assume you can see my SOLIDWORKS screen now. So the first thing I wanted to do is just get into some basics. So I'm just gonna talk about, this is something we talk about day 1 in our essentials class, but not everyone has attended, you know, a formal training class. So when you're creating a line, there's 2 methods to do that. It's click, click, or click, drag. But the behavior on each of those is different. And there's a lot of different ways to start a line. You know, you can go to the command manager and choose a line. Oh, get a cool little video. But I actually, you know, I started with 2D CAD back in the day. And so back then I was using the command line and I would use the letter L. And so fortunately, SOLIDWORKS also has that as a command to start a line. So you can hit L on your keyboard. And so this is the click, click method where you're releasing your mouse twice. So click, click. And what happens is it just keeps attaching a line. My colleagues are seeing how creative I am with my sketch, right? So I just wanted you to know that when you do click, click, you're generating a polyline and it's going to stay, you know, that line command is going to stay active until you hit escape. Or Tim, what do you use? Like a select tool? What do you do?
I click to get out of that. I use mouse gestures, which you'll see, but yeah, I do escape a lot.
Yeah, I do escape. My left index finger is always like hovering over the escape button when I'm sketching, but that's not necessarily everybody's method. Now, click drag is a different way of doing it, and you get different behavior. So click is holding the mouse down and then releasing it at the second endpoint. And you notice that it doesn't keep the line command, it doesn't keep the line attached. So you can actually have varying segments, right? You can create a dash line. You can design CAD in Morse code, right, guys? So, so that's just the difference between click, click and click drag. And that's sketch. And then the next one is path length. This is super underutilized, and there's very specific instances where you need to use path length. So when you want to kind of calculate the belt length, you know, chain length, maybe the perimeter around, you know, a unit. So you can use path length for that without having to individually measure or add. So that's actually from the Smart Dimension toolbox, the Smart Dimension dropdown, and there's the last item says path length dimension. Okay, and it prompts you to select the entities. So you can select, and it can be an open or closed contour. So select OK, and it gives you a value. Now that's a driving dimension. So no matter how I move this, it's going to honor that value. Okay, it's a driving dimension, so you can overwrite that value. Now the only thing to note is that if you add a line segment, so if I add a line segment here, you notice the path length didn't update. So that's slightly dangerous, more so dangerous in a collaborative environment. If you and your colleague are sharing the sketch or working on, on the same part file. So what you need to do is right click on one of the entities and choose edit path and just make sure you add that item and then it'll update. Okay, so that's path length. And then the other thing that you can do, this is really not related to sketching, but if you have a finite number you're looking at, like belt length, your suppliers are going to sell belts in certain length increments, you may want to keep a watch on that. So you can exit the sketch, you have to be outside of sketch, and you can just add a sensor and you can choose dimension and choose the path length as that dimension, so you can monitor that length, because you know that, hey, once you get above, let's say 25 inches, you're now looking at a much larger belt, and then you have to cut it and you may incur all these costs. So anyways, I'm going on and on, but I just wanted to show you path length. The other one I wanted to show you is red dot mystery. So I don't know if you guys are using power trim. So in trim entities, I pretty much exclusively just use power trim. Now I'm probably not sketching and designing as much as you guys are, but I just exclusively use power trim. So this is fine, but there's a little red dot and I've never asked myself what that does, but when you drag back over it, it's basically an undo for your trim. So it just depends, it depends how fast you're doing, but you can kind of trim and then come back through and it will kind of undo that entity. So that's helpful if you get a little crazy with your mouse movements. And then there was another small thing I wanted to mention. It was, midpoint line. So this is really for those of you that have been with SOLIDWORKS for a long time. Midpoint has come a long way. It used to be when you would create a line, you wouldn't necessarily have this midpoint you could grab. It wouldn't appear. You'd have to right click on it and say select midpoint, and it's kind of this convoluted process. So now we have like a little midpoint snap, but now we can also create a line that starts at the midpoint and stretches equidistant. So I can I can get it from the drop-down box here as midpoint line, or you can just get into the line command and select the checkbox for midpoint line, and now I can start it anywhere. I get this line that stretches both ways, and so that's a midpoint line, and you don't have to use it often, but a lot of times you need to use your inference lines to get kind of the center of a square and then draw your line from there. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to close and let's look at convert entities. So convert entities is basically you're creating a new sketch on a plane and you need to borrow geometry from somewhere else in the file. So I have this, convex surface here, very contour, and I need to grab that geometry and project it onto this plane. So I can right click on this plane and create a new sketch, and I can simply select this face. Notice it's not planar, it's a surface really, and I can choose convert entities. Now, it's not flattening that contour surface, it's just projecting those lines directly above. So so it is directly above that face. It's not a flattened face. Flattened face is a different tool and requires SOLIDWORKS Premium. Okay, so I'm gonna ask my colleagues, did I miss anything there? Good. Okay. Okay, cool. Now this also does work for planar faces as well, but I think showing it on a contour face really illustrates how that feature works. Okay. Now I want to show you intersection curve. So intersection curve is a little different. Sometimes you need to borrow some sketch geometry from something else existing in the model, but there's actually not a sketch entity to work with. So this is an example if you want to kind of get that conic section of that bottle. I'm going to go ahead and create a sketch here on this plane. And instead of convert entities, I'm going to use what's called intersection curve. So I want to project wherever the geometry intersects the plane. And I'll choose the bottle, but I'll also choose the bottom face. And I'll accept it. And I get that, that sketch. Pretty easy. So intersection curve is something that's not used very often, but there's going to be moments where that is the only tool you should and can use to be the most efficient. What am I missing? Sketch colors. Okay. Hard changes. Sketch colors. Okay. A lot of times you will want to distinguish your sketches from another or just show that. So the first thing you want to do is make sure your sketches are showing. So view sketches, make sure that's turned on. You can also go from the view pull down menu, hide show, view sketches. Sometimes I will choose it from this menu because it's alphabetized and I know exactly what I'm looking for. Anyway, so you've got these sketches tucked into all these features, and I've turned them on. So you want to control select, and this one does not have a color, but you can just control select. Now, it's important to know you need to be outside of sketch mode in order to assign a color to a sketch. You cannot be in the sketch to assign a color. So I'm not in sketch mode. I can right click, assign a sketch. Oh, I didn't control select both, but get the idea. Okay, and then maybe this top one, same thing. I'm going to right click on it, choose sketch color, and I'll make it red. You probably don't want a big rainbow sketch all over your file, but there's some that you want to draw, attention to. And you'll probably want to identify it with a different color. The sketches are by default in a gray color. And if you don't like that, you can change it in your options, but maybe occasionally you just needed a different color. So that's when you use that. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to hand it off to Tim. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Ami. Okay, so I'm going to start by going through, similar to Ami, talking about how she starts lines. I like to use mouse gestures. So if you're not using this or don't know what's going on, you see these little wheels pop up and these buttons are everywhere. If you'll just go to Customize and then go to the Mouse Gestures tab. Now, if you hate it, you can simply turn it off. Like right there. You just say uncheck and it'll be gone. But it's really pretty cool because you can customize this, right? Not only, it's not just for sketches. I mean, I use it mostly for sketches, but you can see in assembly mode, right? We've got mates, normal to, all the stuff you might use anyhow. But in Sketch, you know, I've got mine set for 8 gestures, and 8's probably plenty for what I normally do in the sketch, right? Lines, circles, rectangles, and dimensions. I have construction line and mirror, but I don't use those that much. Frankly, sometimes I forget they're even on here. You can also, if you don't want that, like say, you know what, I'm really never going to use mirror on here, and I get annoyed when I accidentally go diagonal, you can actually just drop that off, and now nothing happens if I go diagonal. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and keep that, and I'll say okay. All right, so let me jump into a sketch, and you'll see how that works. All right, so now I use that wheel. See, when I go up and diagonal, nothing's going to happen. So you can set that even though I'm set to 8, don't have to use all 8. Right? Maybe you don't want to go for 4 because then you accidentally hit them all the time. So if that's in your way, you can customize it. But like I said, that's how I start the line command dimension. So yeah, how do you get in and out of line? I use the same swipe from right to left. I turn it off and on with the same deal. So that's how I make my lines, rectangles, and dimensions just using the mouse gestures tool. The next thing I want to go over is the transition from line to arc. So I use the line tool. And I'm just basically going to recreate this. Let me actually just delete it out, get rid of all of it. Okay, so I'm gonna start my line. And when I want to transition, you know, what I normally do is just come back and touch. Don't click, just touch that, and that automatically transitions. If you don't like the touch method, instead you can use the A key, but that does involve you having to search for the A key unless you're just constantly on that, because I'm not. My left hand, I find escape and spacebar, that's about it. Okay. If you accidentally get into this, you can also come back and click that end point, and that will take you right back to line. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and make some arcs here. And again,
So
I got that little.
Sorry, Tim, you need to actually click on that point.
Yep, you click that point if you don't want the arc, because the normal habit is you hit escape.
Okay.
Which really isn't the end of the world if you are very efficient turning it back on, but you don't have to. That's kind of the whole thing.
Okay.
Okay, so let me end that arc, and I'll just make some more lines in here. And again, I'm gonna try to always pick up my tangents, all that good stuff. So let me do an arc here. Be weird a little bit, and then make another arc. And another thing is to try and keep in mind, you know, where you're going to end, and so that next line to keep that tangent, what are you trying to accomplish? Like a straight line. That stuff just takes a little bit of practice. So once you get a little bit better at that, that's not a big deal either. And I'll start a new one here in just a second. But again, it's pretty easy to make these rounds without having to stop, draw a rectangle, come back, because I've seen people do it. They'll make like a rectangle, or they'll just draw 2 lines. And then they'll come back and they'll find tangent arc. Well, that's a lot of time. We're having to dig, find this command, stop what you're doing. It just seems a little senseless to me to have to go through more steps than you really need to, unless you guys just have a lot of free time on your hands. If so, be inefficient. That's absolutely fine. So let me just throw another sketch in here real quick.
And then Tim, there's something you do in all the training classes, which I like, is you have a hotkey assigned to show the relations, the sketch relations.
I actually used to have that.
Oh, okay.
I think I've gotten rid of that with 2020. I don't think I can set that back up. So yeah, I'll set that up actually. That's pretty cool here. Right. So another thing, and this is true for beginners as well, when they start this, like, my arc, it keeps going the wrong way. Like, you know, I come over here, I really want it to be tangent. So if you're imagining what that tangent arc would look like, it kind of sweeps around. If you'll try to follow that with your mouse, almost like you're drawing the arc itself, it will usually behave in the manner you want. If it gets a little weird, just come back and again, touch, don't click, and then you can kind of sweep that around. It shouldn't be that big a deal once you've done it a few thousand times. Not really 1,000, but once you've done it a few times, it should be very, very simple. All right, so what Ami was talking about is the sketch relations, like all the tangents and everything that are in that sketch. Actually, let me jump back into it. Okay, so you can see all those. And really, in this one, there's only 4, not a big deal. But and particularly if it's a fairly complex sketch and you mirror it, because every time you mirror, you're going to get a symmetric relation for everything in that sketch, and it becomes problematic. And yeah, you can always come back in here and you can turn these off and on. Yep, I don't have it set up, but it would tell me. So what she's talking about is I usually go through customize, and I used to set this up every time. I'm just filtering by sketch relations, and I was coming here and say that needs to be R. Yeah, because I don't use browse recent documents anyhow. So there we go. And now just a quick little click on my keyboard. But again, I do have to stop and look for that. Yeah. So That is pretty convenient. I just kind of forgot about it, frankly, because I don't design anymore. That's an old habit there. Okay, so that's all my arc talk there. Jump on in here and show you guys some selection sets. Now, I don't have a real complex sketch here, so if you did have something where you're referencing the same things over and over, selection sets do a great job. Frankly, not as handy in Sketch most of the time. I love these when I'm using like one face that I'm going to be using in assembly for multiple mates, that face as a selection set. So every time I want it, I don't have to zoom in, zoom out, whatever the case might be to find these things. I just click them from the selection set. So I'll go through how you add that and kind of what you can do through it. Okay, so I do have the sketch here, but maybe I don't want to use it all. There's some reasons you might want this. So I got this first selection set, and I'm just going to go ahead and extrude with that. I could have done some different things like sketch and offset with those and all that good stuff, right? Right, so I've got that. I could use just the holes. I know I just did the other holes when I just extruded, but I can do those holes separately if I need to extrude or cut. Maybe I want to add a different material, you know, going the other way. If I want to go ahead and extrude those, I could use those for an extrude, right? Say that. Right, so I can just give that whatever dimension I want there. Use the same one again, didn't I? Yeah, so holes. If you extrude with those, if you have your selection set properly there. That's also helpful. So you can make these selection sets. Yeah, I don't know how holes with two things is grabbing everything again. Of course it is, but literally it's
there you go. Okay.
circles. I don't know why it's being weird, but it's grabbing the whole thing every time.
It's SolidWorks. That's all.
Yes, it is. Okay, so we're going to forget the holes there. But the selection set, like I said, it's an easy way to have a subset of a sketch. The only thing that's kind of weird, let me get rid of this extrusion, is in order to set this up, you have to be outside the sketch. You can't set it up while you're in the sketch. So while you're outside the sketch, you can just grab multiple entities, and then when you right click, you'll be able to do a save to selection. Right, you can't do it inside the sketch, and that's my one hang up there, is because it would be much more convenient. So I'm hoping eventually that does change a little bit there too. But you can add to previous ones, or you can make your new selection set. Should make it a lot easier. You don't have to keep your sketches shown the whole time, which if you're like me, I don't like to have anything there that distracts me. So to me, that's a good way to get rid of those. And now I want to go through a little bit of Instant 2D, which if you've been in class with me, I'd probably tell you turn that stuff off. So if you're a beginner, I think it just kind of confuses everything, but I'll assume not everyone's a beginner. It does have some cool benefits here, so you can easily, with Instant 2D turned on here, open your toolbar. So with a single click, you just go right into it. You're ready to type right over the top, which is a little different than the normal behavior. But you can also, if you double click, if you're not already on it, of course, if you double click, you get the old familiar little dialog box to modify the dimension. So you're not limited to just this. But the cool part is you can drag these little blue dots around, and you can even snap to dimensions. Right? And the more you zoom in and out, the more precise it will be, depending on what you're trying to actually accomplish there. Right? So if I zoom in a little tighter, I'll get smaller increments. Zoom out further, I'll get bigger numbers and jumping all around, all that stuff. Works also with angles, right? Whether you're typing them in or just dragging around. And again, the more you zoom, all that good stuff there. So you can drag them out. It's a pretty easy deal to do. Like I said, if you want to, you can just type it instead right over the top. It is actually fairly convenient, and I'm not sure why I discriminated against it so much my whole career here, but I've always said don't use it, and now I'm like, yeah, it's actually all right. Another thing I did want to say real quick, and I always kind of forget this, sometimes getting that 45, not particularly 45, but sometimes getting those angles gets a little weird, you know, it snaps the wrong way and all that, and I usually just even forget about this, but if you right-click an angle and just go to your display options, you can do some different stuff. You can do the vertical opposite or the exemplary, and frankly, I forget about this all the time. Like, oh, it's going the wrong way, but if I just click off there, I can see I can get that dimension going the opposite way, which usually I get this, and I want the inside, so that would be an easy way to right-click, display, and just choose that exemplary, and I'm snapped back over the way I wanted anyhow the whole time.
That's a big word for me.
Yeah, I was hoping I didn't mess that up, because I'm like, ugh.
That's a good one.
Be a spelling test later.
I lost it already.
Oh, man. We recorded it, so you're good.
King of exemplary.
Oh, yes, that's my name here. Okay, so once I got all that, what I want to do now is go through one of my favorite sketch tools. I don't know how often everyone else uses it, but this tool does a whole lot for me. So what I'm going to do is make some modifications to a sketch here, and I did a thin just because I thought it would be kind of cool to do. I'm going to edit this sketch here real quick because they've come back to me and said, you know what, that's not good, Tim. We need to move this around, need to modify it in ways. The one caveat to this, and you'll see that I'm underdefined, because if I try to use this modify sketch, it can't be attached to external geometry. So I can't snap it to another edge. I can't snap it to the origin. But if I can get rid of those, I can delete a coincident pretty easy, right? So I'm going to use modify sketch. And again, if you guys don't know where this is, it's under tools, sketch tools, or hopefully you guys are using your search. And if you're like me, you click every time, but literally if you're going to be typing anyhow, just hit S on your keyboard, gets you right into it, and you can start typing away. So if you just go to modify, there it is. I like to drag and drop on my toolbar because I use it all the time. Anyway, so modify sketch. So what can I do with modify sketch? Well, if I just look at the dialog box, I can scale, I can translate, this is my scale factor here, right? And I can rotate. So I can type in an angle, but also on screen, I don't know how easy that is to see for you, but my left mouse is to pan. Well, that's the sketch. I'm not panning the whole part. I'm just dragging that sketch around, which is basically move. And then if I right drag, that's rotate. So I can snap, and it's pretty good about snapping at like 90 degrees and whatnot. But there's some other cool stuff that's in there. I don't want to say hidden, but it doesn't jump out and grab you. So these little black dots, almost like the little triad in here, those do different things. Again, I don't know how well you can see that, but if I right mouse now, that's going to mirror from right to left, and that's on the rightmost. If I right mouse in the center, that's going to mirror across and up. So I'm basically going, I'm just going to do it. Let me right click that. Right. So that kind of flipped it over or rotated in effect. It's kind of how that happened. And then this top one mirrors top to bottom. So those all do different things. Again, you can left drag that, but the left drag was available the whole time. So again, whether I'm needing to mirror that, completely move it around, not have to worry about, yeah, if you have a completely closed contour, you can drag it. But remember, mine wasn't closed. I had a little construction geometry here. So I don't have that shaded sketch to just click and drag. So it's a little more difficult. Yes, we have move entities, but that's a whole nother thing. So if I need to do several things at once, modify sketch is going to do all that stuff for me with just one command. And then when you're done, just close it out and you're done.
Cool. That's good.
All right, I think I'm done. I'm going to pass it on over to Siobhan.
Sweet.
And Shivani, before you get started, I was just going to remind our attendees, if you guys have any questions, please be sure to put it in the Q&A window as opposed to the chat window if you could. That'll make it easier for us to answer them. And then we will be taking questions and answers at the end, so we'll be answering them live at that time.
Perfect. All right, here we go. My first tip is related to what I would do if I jumped onto somebody else's computer or a different computer for the first time. So it's related to my sketching options. You'll see as I edit this sketch, it goes normal to the screen. So it goes flat to my sketch. That's my first sketching option. And my second is when I'm dimensioning, I'm able to type in dimensions as I'm drawing. So those are two special options that I can turn on. If I go check out my system options here, and I go to my sketch area, my first one here is auto rotate, view normal to the sketch plane. So rotate that sketch normal when I make a new sketch or when I edit a sketch. Some of the other options here give me dimensions to type in when I'm drawing in my sketch, and then only make dimensions when I actually type in a number and hit enter. I think that's pretty critical to turn on. I'll point out why. When I'm drawing my rectangle here, if I decide that I want this length to be related to a relationship or something else in my sketch, if I just left click my mouse button, you'll see that that dimension doesn't get forcibly put on that rectangle. So that just helps me prevent accidentally doing a bunch of overdefined sketches for some reason. So those two options that I turned on were both in the System Options tab. System options are related back to your registry. So when I close SOLIDWORKS and that'll save it to my registry, to my user settings. So from then on, whenever I open up any other future parts, it will be using these settings. And because I like them so much, if I have to switch laptops like I did very recently, I will go into Copy Settings Wizard and make sure my favorite system options, like I just picked, are exported so I can import them to my other computer. That's my system options. The next few tips are going to kind of be related to more of an admin thing. Let's take a look at the sketches in my tree. My first sketch 1, that icon looks a lot like the sketch icon up here. But my sketch 3, that icon is more of like a dead fish in a hand. That dead fish is contour select. Tim kind of referenced it when he was doing his selection sets.
I love that. My favorite part so far. Okay.
Dead fish. So what is this dead fish thing? It's a sketch that's being used by multiple features, right? If you look at those purple arrows, they're pointing down to 2 separate features. So it's being used multiple times. It's potentially a master sketch, something that I'm going to be referencing multiple times throughout the entire part file creation. So it can help to rename these so that you can go back to them and edit them very easy. And if you go even further, when you go to design tables in Excel or API, having things properly named makes life so much easier. So how do I rename this? You know, the old slow ways, feature properties, you right click. Most people will do a slow double click on that text, right? That'll eventually cause you to get an edit like this. I take advantage of some Microsoft functionality. If you click on that sketch and then hit F2 on the keyboard, F2 is edit text in Excel, edit cell in Excel. So we're just stealing that functionality here in SOLIDWORKS. Now I've certainly met people who they're just trying to get access to these icons, and so they're clicking on the text here, but they accidentally cause the text to edit all the time, which is very frustrating to them. Just a little way to train your hand. Train yourself to click on the icons if your intention is to get these icons. If your intention is to edit the text, then that's the only time you should actually click on the text. Good stuff. From there, what else can Microsoft teach us about efficiency tricks in SOLIDWORKS? We know Microsoft has a bunch of like copy paste commands in the right click menu, but if I take a look in that menu, I don't see copy and I don't see paste. But if I do go to edit, you know, I do see the common stuff here, and I see, of course, the common keyboard commands, so I can absolutely steal those. Copy that sketch and maybe paste it on the front plane. So if I take a look at this sketch, having copied it, it's a direct copy of the sketch I originally had. It has all the dimensions and the relationships from my earlier sketch. The only thing it's missing is a connection back to the origin, a way to lock it in place. So that is always not going to get copied. We do always have to add that back in. So it's a good recommendation to have a fully defined sketch before you start copying it around. So with a drag and drop, I can get that connected back there. Now there's 2 other types of copy. One is called a derived sketch. If I hover over this and read this tooltip, to make a derived sketch, I need a selected sketch and a selected face or plane. Let me just go ahead and do what I had before. And derive sketch. Okay, that doesn't look very different, right? I seem to have the same sketch. The origin's following it around. And there's no dimensions. And if I turn on my relationships, like same thing, I don't have anything going on with this sketch. But I can't add anything to it, right? I'm trying to add a dimension here. And it says I can only do placement dimensions or placement relationships. And that's because this derived sketch is related back to the original sketch that I derived it from. It's kind of a parent sketch. So if I change the parent sketch in some way and watch this sketch here, you'll see it update. See that? So it's a copy, it's a child of that original sketch. If the parent changes, the child has to change. Perfect. One more type of copy. Let me just draw my own sketch over here. Let's do a rectangle and a circle. Okay. This is more for people who potentially have underdefined sketches and need to move them around in the sketch itself. I run into this a lot with people who are copying and pasting DXFs from old DXF drawings or DWGs. So they have a bunch of sketch entities that don't have enough dimensions and relationships, but they need to move it to a place in the part. So you have this move entities area here in my command bar, which is nice. And since I'm focusing on copy, I'll teach this to you with copy. So I can go to copy entities. I can box select all of these entities here. From to is my favorite. I pick a point to go from and then a point to go to. My one downside to this, see that it doesn't snap to the origin the way that I want. So, Control Z a couple times. Another little trick, the same thing, is to hold Control on the keyboard. Okay, I'm going to write it. So hold down the Control key, drag from a vertex, gain that copy. I get my relationships. If I let go of my mouse button, it copies that sketch and the relationship is maintained, right?
Awesome.
And for my DXF people out there who just truly want to move this, the even more subtle trick, hold Control, drag it over there, let go of Control, and then let go of your mouse. So it's moved my sketch entities and added the relationship. It's a little trick.
That was good.
Good one.
She's tricky.
And your Zoom annotation skills are also on point, Shivani.
Oh yeah, there.
You're schooling us with your Zoom skills.
Yeah. Our levels are increasing. Okay. So my last little thing here was going to be on sketch fillets. I've got two different kinds of parts modeled up here. This is one with sketch fillets, and here's my feature fillets, and I use the R key. I think it's awesome. Okay, so I've got two different parts here. This one here on the left is modeled with my fillet features. It's more traditionally modeled, right? We start with our blocky design, and then we add our complex, our cosmetic fillets after the fact. Definitely more traditional. Here on the right, you can see I only have 3 features, and my fillets are combined into the sketch. I've used either the sketch fillet command here or other types of curves and conics to build up the rest of the shape. There's pros and cons to doing anything in SOLIDWORKS, like why would we do one over the other? Starting with one of the pros to doing this with sketch fillets, if I take a look at Windows Explorer and my part file size, a sketch fillet, the one that has my fillets done inside the sketch, has a smaller file size than the one that had multiple features. So this kind of leads us to believe that if you have more features in the SOLIDWORKS tree, you are going to have a larger file size. Not that much, 15 kilobytes is not much, but yeah, it's minor performance things. Now the downside to having a bunch of sketches with funky curves in them is the second you want to go in and try and edit them. Let me just try and move this around and change the shape. You can see it's not really doing what I expect it to do. And I broke it. This is very easy when you have complex curves, right? So this is kind of the trouble with them. So to kind of summarize what my thinking is here, using sketch fillets and curves in your sketches is useful for saving file size, but it's a complicated issue if you plan on making a lot of edits to that sketch. It could just cause you problems down the road. So I recommend that you use your sketch fillets if you are doing something like a purchase part that you don't plan on editing, but you want to keep the file size low. I think that's a good reason to take advantage of them. Good stuff. Last little bit, a little bit of a Shivaniism. I like the mouse gestures Tim showed. On our parts and everything, we have different mouse gestures and different shortcuts, right? The S key is your shortcuts. For me, I take advantage of the short key bar a lot with that S key, but I've mapped it to my mouse gestures. So whether I'm doing part editing or sketch editing or whatever, my shortcut bar is in the same direction. So I can go access commands that I don't normally use very quickly without having to go up to the top left of the screen. That's my last little tip. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Stephen Darcy.
That's good. Here, I got something for you, Shivani.
Oh, yeah?
Little fish in the hand.
It's
good.
We'll have to put that in our icon quiz PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, let me go find my SolidWorks real quick. Say that. There we go. So some of my quick tips. First is kind of doing some, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, you're great.
Motion with 2D stuff. Let me move this little guy out of the way. All right, so I have just a little 2D sketch. This is an old jigsaw demonstration, and kind of the way it works is that you have a motor, and of course the motor spins around and around, and on a jigsaw, when the motor spins around and around, then the jigsaw blade goes up and down. So if we add some quick little relationships here, I'm gonna just do tangent and tangent. There we go. And then we start to drag around and around. You can kind of see the side view actually goes up and down. So we get kind of a sine wave there. And then if you want to get really crazy with it, you can add another relationship. So I've got this guy that is pretty much stuck. He goes left and right. We'll put one coincident relationship on him. And then with that, because he's at an angle there, when I have something going up and down, I can also have something kind of go left and right. And then, of course, if you want to play with some of the dimensions on there, if we decide to make this guy like 60, then we'll see that update. And then we can play with this and find out what our stroke is going to look like. So as we change that angle, we can see what the stroke is gonna change. So some kind of fun stuff, you know, with parametrics. Let's get a little crazier, and we'll do. I've got a little piston actuation here. We'll edit that. So very similar to the other one, except I pretty much just have a motor and a linkage, and the linkage is gonna, you know, make the piston go back and forth. So all your engines, not electric, are working in this way. So with that, we'll go to a little claw. You make any kind of robots and stuff, you may need something similar to this. I decided to make this one a little bit different, where we had kind of like a piston actuation on here. So if I start to drag this kind of to the left, you'll see the claw open and close. So if we have a hydraulic or pneumatic actuator, then we can kind of see how this thing's going to work and function. And the main reason why you want to do this in 2D is because it's a lot quicker and easier to do it in 2D. Make sure that the fit, form, and function is right before you actually go to 3D.
That's
so then I
Steve.
started.
That's really cool.
That was a
That's
cool
cool,
one,
Steve.
yeah.
That nerdy.
But cool.
So here's a crazy one that I didn't think about until I started doing it. You have a rack and pinion steering, or everything's electronic steering. But when you offset it from the center of the tire, they actually change at different angles. And so I put some angle relationships on a little bit earlier, and it's kind of interesting the way that these things kind of move and function. But main point is, of course, you could do this in 2D before you do it in 3D. Exactly how it's going to work. This one's actually pretty simple. I probably should have done this a little bit more first. But I have kind of like a little scissor lift. And as I drag this, you can kind of see it going up and down. You may want to get a little crazier with it, start modeling in the wheels, as the wheels have to kind of go back and forth. You know, I'll be pinned at this end, but a wheel mechanism have to go left and right on there and on the top. But of course, main thing about this is what's your size function on that. All right, last one. This one gets a little bit crazy. This one actually took me a while. And I tried to kind of model up a little bit of a backhoe. And so if I start to grab this, and it may get a little bit wiggy, you can kind of see I can start digging up some of the dirt here. And you got to make machine noises. And then you can drag some of the other actuation things. And again, really what you're trying to do is figure out what's my min and max on where you can kind of move and make things happen and work right. So that way you get planned out real quick in 2D, and then you, of course, go to 3D. All right, from there, contour select, you guys touched on it a little bit. For the most part, it's being able to do many different little parts in one sketch. So in this case, I'm just going to go right to the extrude. We'll clear out the select contours, and there's two different ways to do it. I can pick on the rectangle itself, And we'll just extrude that up. And then what you can do is turn the sketch back on. And then if I just pre-select the sketch, we'll go to extrude again. In this case, instead of picking on the circle, I'll pick inside the circle, and that's going to be what we call a region. So I'll make that one just a little bit taller. And then we can kind of do the exact same thing. We'll do a sketch, pick on the sketch, do an extrude. And this time I want to get the whole rectangle, so I'm going to pick on the outside of the rectangle. That's going to be a contour. And I'll make that one big as well. And again, the main thing about this is that you're using the exact same sketch over and over again. So if you decide to make a change in it, if I edit the sketch and make this circle bigger, there we go. And then finish out of the sketch, and everything's going to update appropriately with what you've selected. So trying to minimize the amount of steps you can do just with a single sketch. Try not to make those too complicated. But if you have 3 different sketches, if anybody has been in the Essentials class, you can kind of go through this example. And I'm going to do one more thing. I do like adding things to favorites. If you're going to go back and forth to the sketches, and it puts in a little favorites folder, and then you can go in and see all your little sketch favorites here. All right, I'm going to start off with the front plane, just do an extrude just like I was doing. Except again, instead of just doing the single loop profiles, I'm going to clear the contours out of there. And I want to create all my additional parts first. So I'm going to just do this mid-plane 55, looks good. And then we can get a little bit trickier. If I pre-select what I'm going to do, like that outside rectangle, I'm going to go right into extrude. I've used some of the key shortcuts like Shivani and Tim were showing you. So this one, I'm going to go up to surface and just select on that guy. So that's pretty cool. And it's pre-selecting that. So this time I'm going to pre-select the circle, go right into extrude. And then we'll go up. In this case, we'll do 70 millimeters. Fine. So now if I've added all my material there, now I can do some subtraction. So I'll pick on that. I'm just going to do extrude cut. Then I'll select multiple contours. I'll pick this little keyway, pick the inside of this guy, and we'll just say through all both. We got that command a couple years ago. And then same thing, I could go in and keep doing little cuts and things like that as I need to. So main point is that you can use some pretty simple geometry, and in this case 3 different sketches, and create some pretty awesome 3D sketches for 3D geometry. All right, turn your sketches off before you hit the save button, otherwise people will make fun of you. All right, pretty cool. Not too much time. So that's select contour. So next I'm going to go into 3D sketching. And 3D sketching is on the little drop down right here. So you're going to insert a new 3D sketch. And when you do that, you'll see some of these things ghost out. So I can't do like slots. Things that have to belong on a 2D plane, you can't really create. But for the most part, just start the line command. And you'll see this little, I call it a user coordinate system, or UCS. So in this case, I'm going to go up. You can see I'm going in the Y direction. I'm going to get like about 20, somewhere in there. If I want to flip it back, you hit the tab key. I can go back in space, so I'm going about the Z. And hit tab again, and it's going to flip it again. Maybe I want to go that way. Let's go back again. Oop, you can see I can do the same thing that Tim did with the arc. I'm actually going to go back in the line command. And tab it. And let's go over, and then I'm just going to go down just a little bit more. And we do have fillets, so I can create fillets. It's a pretty good size, so I'm going to make little 5-inch fillets on there. And again, this is going in X, Y, and Z all at the same time. So once you're done with your 3D sketch, then you can do some stuff just like a sweep. Just go to my features, do a swept boss or base. In this case, I'm going to do a circular profile. And we'll change, oops. Here we go. We'll change this guy to, let's say, 5-inch piece of pipe. Turn off my mesh preview. And then we can also do something cool, a thin feature, and I'll give it 1/8 of an inch. So now we actually have a hollow pipe in there. So that's how you can do some pretty simple 3D sketches. We can get a little crazier. And if we add some geometry in here for construction geometry to tell it where to go, then we can put splines in there. And then we can use splines and lines to kind of do the same thing. I'll just do a swept boss or base. Do circular profile, and we'll just do this 1 inch. And it's going to sweep across the lines. When you do this, try and make a lot of tangent relationships so everything's nice and smooth as it contours around there. And then, so this would be, you know, you're doing piping, you could do tubing, and then maybe I want to pick on a 3D sketch and a 2D sketch, and we'll do, again, a swept boss or base. And I'll just say, okay. And this one's a little bit cooler looking because I've actually modeled in a bunch of little wires. So if you want to see what like a little cable might look like, then you can sweep all of those across a 3D path. All right, moving on. What else can you do with 3D? You can do weldments. This I use quite a bit. So I've got a little table, and the table was completely generated from 3D Sketch. So all straight line segments, makes it real nice and easy. Put dimensions in there to make it fully constrained. And then once you're done, you just use the weldment feature to create an actual 3D mechanical thing. Let's get even crazier with 3D sketches. This, if anybody has been to the advanced parts, you've probably seen this. So I've used some of a 3D sketch, then I used a helix, a variable helix to create this, and then a composite curve to create the little end in here. And then once I did half of it, then just mirror it across the other side, and you can create that. What else can you do with 3D sketches? Have you ever seen one of these? It's pretty tricky because you're actually moving in the X, Y, and Z at the same time. So I've got 2 different sketches in here, so we'll just play with one of these real quick. So I got a black sketch there. This is actually an equation-driven sketch, and it's I'm going 0 to pi, so it's actually 8 times pi. So it's going 4 revolutions around. It is a pure circle. If I look straight down, you can see it's 17.5 millimeters in diameter. And then I've got it to where it's actually changing, as I'm changing t, 0 to pi, I'm actually changing about the x, the y, and the z. And so you can create, you have what the equations are to create the polynomials, you can create some pretty awesome stuff. So create 2 of those things with loft between them, and then I just thickened them, and then I did a little cut to make sure I was on the outside edge of that. So pretty crazy 3D sketch stuff. All right, one other thing you can do with 3D sketches. Let me turn my real view off so you can see this a little bit. Let's do a 3D sketch. And this is probably one of my favorites, called spline on surface. What it allows you to do is to kind of go across faces. And we'll just end it right there. And if you zoom or pan around, you can kind of see, hopefully the video will keep up with you guys. You can see that that spline is on those 2 surfaces as it kind of branches out. So that's a pretty awesome thing. Now what we can do with that, I'm going to do a 3D spline on surface. And I'm going to use this point. Hopefully I didn't mispick on that. And that point. Yep, I mispicked. Sorry, I felt it when I clicked. I was like, oh man, I don't know if I got it right there. All right. So we get that. And we'll get that little point there. All right. And then we're going to, I want to make it tangent to these little lines here. And same thing, we'll do tangent to the top. There we go, and that should fully constrain it. And then we can do some surfacing techniques. So I can do trim surface with the 3D sketch. And first I'm just gonna pick on that little teeny tiny little bit right there. We'll trim that off. And then once that's trimmed off, then we can make some more complex stuff if I wanna do a field surface or something like that. I'll pick on this little edge here. And we'll just say select the open loop. And we can turn on our curvature display right here. Turn on our mesh preview. And we can see what that surface is going to look like. And again, a lot of times 3D sketches are going to help you to create some nice smooth transitions between surfaces so you can patch those things up. All right, enough 3D sketch stuff. Let's get a little crazier. Look at this complicated 2D-dimensional master sketch. Well, what we can do with this is we can actually insert a part into a part. And when we do that, we can actually start to build an assembly off of just a 2D sketch. So if I take a look at, let's say for instance, this part, I'll just pick on him. And we'll open him up in his own window. And all I've done is inserted a part into a part. And all I've done is just inserted that unabsorbed sketch. So I'm just using that same sketch over and over again through all of these individual parts. And then I'm using the contour select to just select on the inside of that to rotate around. And what this allows me to do is to change something that's fairly simple, like this master sketch. So I'll change 2 dimensions just to make it quick. We'll make it 14 millimeters long. This is a little bit wider there. You'll see it change. And let's change, not that 3, let's change the 2.5. We'll make it a little bit taller, 2.75. There you go. And then as I finish out of the sketch, all I have to do is select into the assembly, and you'll see it change in just a bit. So everything updates. If I do a little section view, you can see all my individual little components inside here, and they all stretch and grow depending on that 3D or that 2D sketch. So this is kind of a master model technique. Use something simple, use a 2D sketch, and then put each of those 2D sketches into the individual parts and let them update. Now, if you're doing very large assemblies, assemblies over probably 50 or more, I wouldn't recommend doing this, but because they can get complicated on the external references. But for small assemblies like this, it's perfect. It's really good stuff. So that's all I got for you. I'm gonna hand it back over to me.
Hey. Awesome. Okay, so I just wanted to recap what we talked about. So can you guys see this?
Yep.
Okay, so just kind of recap what we talked about. I know we talked about kind of like sprinkled in a few extra things, but for the most part, we talked about, you know, we started simple with path length and just some of the introductory things like click, 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 drag. Convert and intersection curve are, you know, from the same command on the command manager. And then when you trim, there is a way to kind of undo that trim instead of undoing everything. Sketch colors. Someone had a good question about sketch colors, and it was like, hey, how does SOLIDWORKS, if I want the sketch to be blue, how does SOLIDWORKS know it's still a defined sketch? There's actually 3 ways to know if SOLIDWORKS recognizes your sketch is fully defined. The first one being it will tell you it's a fully defined sketch in the status bar at the bottom of your SOLIDWORKS application. The second way is to see if there's a minus sign next to that sketch. If you have, in the feature tree, if there's a minus sign next to one of your sketches, that means it's underdefined. And then when you are in the sketch, if you see any blue lines, that means that it's underdefined. So even if your sketch is colored blue, there are still other indicators to tell you if SOLIDWORKS recognizes that it's fully defined. Midpoint line. Then Tim showed us line to arc transition by moving away from the point and coming back to it. Some cool tricks there. We used instant 2D selection sets, and selection sets are not only for sketches, but also for edges and faces. So it's really for anything in your model, but it definitely applies to sketches. Mouse gestures, it was really cool to see how you could customize that. Modify sketch, lots of ways to manipulate your sketch within one window. Shivani showed us some really cool sketching options using the, we call that the sketch numeric input, is that right, Shivani?
Yep.
That's a formal term for it.
Yeah.
Renaming the sketch, the dead fish in the hand, I can't forget that. Copy and derive sketches, and then she also showed us a comparison of, you know, having the fillets in your sketch versus as a feature. We also looked at select contours from Steve. Steve showed us some motion in sketches, and then the 3D sketches that we saw, lots of really cool ways to use sketches to see some of these things. And then master sketches. So at this time, we're going to take some questions. Why are you laughing?
Oh, man.
Do you want to start with the Q&A and then go to the chat after?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, so we've got some questions in the Q&A.
First one, is it better practice to use a linear sketch pattern or feature linear pattern? I think this one relates back to what I was doing with the sketch fillets and stuff. It's the same conversation, right? If you have it all in your sketch, it's going to be lighter weight. It'll be a smaller part file ultimately, but it becomes complex very quickly to edit. So I would recommend a feature linear pattern. I find that much easier to modify. That would be my first
I agree
guess.
with that.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do patterns of patterns. If you're going to do a pattern of a pattern, then keep it in the sketch and then do a pattern of that. Works typically doesn't like doing
The most lightweight way. Yeah, that way you can do geometry pattern. Remember geometry pattern as well.
Yep.
So like use Darcy's method and then turn on the geometry pattern checkbox to keep that really low performance.
And if you're not sure about the rebuild time or if a feature is driving up the rebuild time, you can go to that part file on the evaluate command manager for that part and look at performance evaluation. I believe that's the window that will tell you which feature, it can sort which feature is taking the longest to rebuild. Am I right on that?
That all sounds good. So do you guys get paid to do this, or because I don't?
Me neither. I didn't know we could.
It's all fun.
Volunteer work.
Break. All right, what's the third one here?
I can take part of that one if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to share my screen real quick. So, and hopefully I got the answer to this, so you'll have to kind of excuse me if I get it wrong. You can add global equations. We didn't really cover that because we decided not to go down that entire rabbit hole. But something you can do, and this is kind of a little tricky thing, is that if I'm going to edit the dimension here, and I just select on the dimension, notice it just puts the dimension value in there. And I can hit OK and I'm done. But if you hit the equal sign, just like in Excel, and then I select on the variable, now it actually assigns it to that variable. And then you'll get a quick little equation. And then, of course, if I change something to 2 dimensions or 2, then they're both going to update and change. So that's kind of the first part of that question there.
Actually, Darcy, could you show the equation, or could you make it an equation like 2 + 1 or something, and then show the equations folder?
Definitely, and I can add to here as well. So maybe I want to say a +5 millimeters. Even though I'm in inches, if I put the extension for the unit, then it will calculate that. And you will see in your equations, we can go manage equations. This is where you wanted me to go, Shivani?
Yeah, thank you.
So you can see the global equations, and we can name them if we need to, length, width, and all that stuff here. We can also do them on the fly in the sketch. Yep.
We skipped one in the middle, right? How do you reset part sketch origin? Say I want to change the Z direction. Oh, like for people doing aerospace parts or something?
Is that like changing the coordinate system? Is that what it is?
I think so, like changing the front view, top view, right view. Most people that I see do this for aerospace parts, they just change their templates and they rename their planes.
I have seen this before, but I don't call on command what that is. But we have your contact information, the person who raised this question, so we'll be sure to give you that answer.
Yeah, most people I see just change a template and then change the names of their planes. So it looks like Z is now vertical, for example.
Yeah. What else do we have?
Use convert splines to rid of the tangent lines.
I don't know when that came in.
And as you guys are reading through those, I just wanted to ask our participants, just stick around. We have a giveaway coming up. And
do you want to give that out?
Chances to
win. We might want to do that because some people probably have to leave if you want to do that.
Okay, let me do that. Okay, so Okay, so here is our, you guys can see my screen still, right? Nope. Okay. Sorry about that. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Okay, so please submit your feedback and questions to this email address. That's mine. But I can forward it to any of our panelists. So all you have to do for our giveaway, it's a $25 Amazon gift card, is just answer this simple question. What is your favorite sketch tip, tool, or setting? It doesn't have to be one of the ones we discussed here today. It could be just one we didn't mention at all. And you can submit your answer either on Twitter or Facebook. And just make sure you use the hashtag SWX design from home. So that's all one word, SWX design from home. And I will tell you, we did a webinar recently with over 1,000 people and only 3 people participated in this. So everyone that participated won. So your chances of winning are probably really high if you want to participate. And then what else? One more thing. Oh, okay, so the next webinar is introducing the Stratasys J55. It's super awesome. You can't miss this if you're interested at all in just knowing what this machine can do. Tyler Reed is the presenter, and he's such a good presenter. So if you have time, definitely make it to this presentation. And that's all we have for you. So much, guys. It was so fun. And Steve, Tim, and Shivani, it was really fun presenting with you guys. I hope we can do more panel style webinars. For you guys, we'd love some feedback on what style, if you enjoyed this style of a webinar. But other than that, have a good rest of the week.
And we'll continue the Q&A. Yeah, we're not hanging up on you guys.
Yes.
It's just letting people who need to leave.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. I guess we don't really understand the convert spline to get rid of the tangent lines. Oh, that's probably for like if you did like an extrude of like a cam and you just don't want the individual faces. You can use convert
spline or something.
Yeah, you can use fit spline. That's a nice tip. Yeah, fit spline. All right, we have another one from Melissa. When I have issues with sketches, it is often because a converted entity point or line is missing. And oftentimes there's small gray dots that are difficult to see and sometimes sit on top of a new line. Is there a way to delete those missing instances at once without having to find each one by one?
Is this where we could suggest the red dot editing feature, you know, when you're missing a reference or something? You know, when you convert and the sketch is missing if it's reference. There's usually, you know, in chapter 9 we talk about editing. I think.
Right.
Like and there's a red
references.
dot. So Melissa, one thing is if it's missing a reference, usually that sketch may have like a little red dot floating around, and that means you can possibly drag that red dot to the entity that it's looking for, the one that's missing, and you may have a new entity. So if you drag that dot to like the new entity, it will kind of correct itself. So that's one thing, but I don't know about the small gray dots.
Right. I wonder, it might also be referring to repair sketch, where it helps us find small entities or something like that. Maybe. Yeah. This would be a good one for us to talk about later when we can
actually see
about the person. Yeah.
The next one, I'll handle that one in just a little bit. I know there's one further on down. Actually, these kind of all go to
3 or 4.
How do you create multiple parts with one 2D sketch? All 3 of these I'm going to handle together.
Okay.
So give me a second. I'll kind of go a little bit more in detail on how I did this sketch. So set this, and we'll totally get out of the assembly here, and I'll kind of show you step by step on how I created this. Shouldn't take too much time. So I have the master sketch. So hopefully you guys are familiar with the sketches. It's just a 2D sketch. But I tried to put a lot of detail in there as far as, what I wanted on each part. And you did have to kind of think about where does one part start and the other one end. So that was a little bit tricky. But then all you do is just start a new part. I'll start a new part. Then we can insert a part into a part. So there's nothing in here right now. So just insert part into part. So there, notice it's an open document, and I only want the unabsorbed sketch. If I had solid, if I wanted to actually do like the 3D extrude distance, then I could do some of that stuff. But for this, I just want the one sketch. Just make it real simple. So notice what it's doing in my new part is it's just putting in that sketch. So now all I got to do is really just select on that sketch. In this case, I did a revolve. And I used that line as that. I did the select contours, and I just pick on that guy. And we'll just say OK. And then this is kind of a cool thing. You just do save. So I'm just going to save this guy as, I was using 200 this time. I'll do 200. So that's my main cylinder. And then I've already got this inserted into that. So all I got to do is a save as. And I'll save this guy as 201. And then really all I have to do is come back in and modify my revolve. So I'm just going to add that feature. And remember, I'm on 201 now. And I'm just going to change this. And let's pick on, I've got a little brass bearing that I have in here. So just pick on that profile. And then there's my second part. May want to change the material to brass. And then hit the save button. And then kind of same thing. Then we could do a save as. This guy as 2. And then again, just modify the revolve again, pick on the next contour sketch. And so that way I'm quickly creating these things without having to go too deep into really the references or anything like that. So this guy is also, now, I've quickly created 3 separate parts. You can open them up. I'll go find my 201 and 202. I've got 202, 200 and 201. There you go. And if I change my master sketch, then it's going to update and change these individual things too. So hopefully that'll handle all 3 of those.
Somebody asked, well, the next one on the list was, is it best practice to ensure all sketches are defined, or are there scenarios where underdefined sketches would work? Technically, you can always have underdefined sketches, but we really recommend, or I really recommend, defined sketches. I think having a fully defined sketch is just going to prevent you from accidentally missing that human error aspect, right?
If you're underdefined, you can't predict what's going to happen if you change your part. So that's really the big kicker. If you don't care where parts go when you modify them, don't define them.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't know. You got to wait till the guy comes back from the shop to do the dimensions. And
well,
you
make up something too. Anyway.
Well, and once you have a part that's got errors in the sketch, and then you insert that into an assembly and insert that assembly into another assembly, the issue can compound. So we always recommend you have fully defined sketches, but there may be certain instances you can't, and maybe you can get, I mean, I'm not a fan of fixing geometry blindly, but sometimes you can do that to get around the issue.
Darcy, while you have your screen showing, can you show the arrows? Yeah.
Yep.
So for that next question, there was that parent-child relationship arrows that I was talking about when I did my sketches. Darcy's showing the buttons here. So it's the dynamic reference visualization of parent and child.
Yeah, just right-click on that top level.
Perfect. Gregory asked Darcy, how did you change from one axis to another in a 3D sketch?
Tab.
Tab key.
Tab is your friend.
David said Z vertical changes Horizontal vertical relationships. How do we change them? Again, needing that vertical z-axis for aerospace stuff.
Just in a 3D sketch, or do you think he's talking about?
I think he's
Changing the
planes.
coordinate system.
I think the only way is modify sketch that Tim showed, right? That's the
Right.
only thing that actually changes the vertical and horizontal. So
The only other thing that I might do is if they're opening up a step file, then you can use move copy bodies. Actually,
Yeah.
get the entire body one direction or the other. But yeah, if it's just a plain part file, then really just start sketching where you want to sketch. I can rename this guy Y and rename him whatever.
Some people are asking about, where they can get a copy of this presentation. We have recorded this presentation. It's still being recorded, actually, so everyone, don't say anything mean to me. We're going to post it on YouTube probably within 24 hours. So once we do that, we will send all of our attendees the link to that.
Good stuff. Yeah, the Z direction stuff is a hard one, but I think the only real answer to that is modify sketch. Is the only way to change vertical and horizontal relationships. Or yeah, move copy body.
Yeah, I feel like this has come up before and I just don't recall what that is, but yes, so someone's asking if you have multiple sketches in a part that have been used for different features, can you copy just one of those sketches into a new part? Yes. I have done this and I haven't tried it in a while, but I believe what I did is I tiled my two windows side by side, and I really just copied, kind of like what Shivani was showing with the Windows hotkeys. I did a Control-C and then a Control-V in the other pane. Have you guys had to do that before?
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. We missed one. What is the best way to define, control, and fix the curvature of a spline?
Ray?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
So I will tell you, for the most part, whatever the spline looks like, the curvature combs you'll be able to visualize what the curvature combs look like. But we can't actually cause it to twist unless we're in a feature for that. So if you're in the sweep command, we do have the option to twist it 180 degrees as we're sweeping around it. But actually controlling the curvature of it itself, we don't have any real control over that. You just have to really find out where it starts and where it ends.
Best ways is really just putting relationships and dimensions on the spline handles, right? Let me try and steal the screen.
Sometimes I'll use construction geometry just to kind of help.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is Darcy, are you doing something?
Again, like
Yeah, I was
herding
going to
cats.
kind of show.
Yeah. Oh, could you show style spline with the construction?
Yep. Give me a second. I was going to.
And while you do that, Dennis in our audience had a question. He wants to pre-select references for a sketch. I wasn't quite sure what he meant, like which references. I guess I'm not understanding. Is it like when you're doing convert entities, those references, or? So Dennis, if you could kind of clarify or kind of paint us a scenario, I think we could answer that question a little bit better.
Okay, so for Gregory, Darcy's doing this style spline method, which
Mm-hmm.
automatically puts construction lines around your spline. It makes it so much easier to fully define it because it's something we're more used to, right? Horizontal, vertical relationships, dimensions. I think it works a bit easier.
Since you mentioned construction geometry, when I was showing trim, Tim pointed out there is a checkbox where when you're trimming, it will ignore construction geometry. So next time you guys use power trim, just think of Tim's sketch tip on ignoring construction geometry when trimming.
I didn't want to derail you early on.
Stop the presses. Okay. We got another one here. Let's see, I lost it. Oh, do inserted parts get managed in PDM? And the second part is checked into PDM. Oh, does the inserted part show up as a child? As I recall, the inserted part is not checked in or referenced. Okay. So like when we do the insert part into part, do you have it as part of the where used or something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Any file, if it shows up on your file references, and usually if you've inserted a part into a part, or some kind of derived part like that, it still shows up on your file references, and I believe that's exactly what gets carried over into PDM. Steve, I know you're you're already doing something else.
I'm gonna try it in a second.
Okay.
That's
I believe it shows up on the contains tab, and it does show up as an inserted.
I think the thing that doesn't is library feature parts, right? The LFP files, and those ones you have to do the manual copy to.
I think that's right.
So I guess that's because it's registered as a feature, right?
Right, exactly. Where it's not a part, it's a feature.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me see. Inserted parts. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood this question completely about the PDM check-in. Does it show up as a child? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does.
So Darcy's putting them into PDM, and now he's checking them in because you've got to check them in for the references to be maintained in there at least once.
yeah. So notice that they are. It's going to add the reference for the master sketch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So make sure that if you do that, make sure the master sketch goes into the PDM as well.
Okay. So.
And somebody asked why your master sketch wasn't fully defined in the tree, Darcy. Was it just one sketch line or something that wasn't defined?
That's a good question. Let me find out what's. I was thinking that it was, but I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, it does look like it's not. My guess is that I don't know though. So there is a feature here. I didn't do locate part with move copy feature, so that way it should put it at 0, 0. So it should be static at that location. So the real question is, yeah, and I don't have the option to edit it, so I won't be able to modify it. It should show fully defined. That's interesting.
Yeah, Tim
It's
has
a fun one.
about that.
Oh, we should have. Okay, that's cool. That's a good one. I wonder why.
All right.
But it is fully defined in the master sketch as well. So.
Okay. Oh, I've seen this question before. Someone was asking, how do you control which way is up when you create a new sketch? So I think, there's two sides to a plane in theory. I can't remember. There used to be like a positive and negative way, like it was green on one side or red on the other.
Yeah, if you have a plane, you can do the flip normal. You can see it at the very bottom. Look at Steve.
Yeah, that's.
Yep. But Nami's correct. There is an option where you could show positive planes are green. The negative side is red.
Cool.
That's good. Okay.
So many questions.
I know, it's great. Does anyone know how to convert a 3D model to a DGN microstation file? No, that's not one of the file types that SOLIDWORKS so there is a long list of file extensions that SOLIDWORKS can translate. We have a webinar actually on file translation. It's about, I don't know, a 45-minute webinar on importing best practices, but DGN is not one of those extensions that we typically see or that SOLIDWORKS works with. But if there's another file extension that MicroStation can export to, then we might be able to try some things out. Okay, what else? Could it just be that the axis you revolved around in the master sketch, that's the one that's not fully defined?
It might be. I don't know. I typically don't put a dimension on stuff like that, but I do typically put a relationship. This equals something.
Yeah.
I'll just make this guy equal to.
Yeah, it's already fully defined now.
Yeah, but it really was open for that construction. Usually,
Yeah, I gotcha.
geometry, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
And it does look fully defined here. So we'll see how that updates.
I'm not sure. How can you control via dimension the minimum radius of a 3D spline? I don't think, there's not a way to do that, is there?
I'm aware of.
Only in piping.
Well,
Using routing.
yeah,
Routing.
Go to routing.
We-
Go to
and just delete
routing.
the pipes out.
We need to get Tony to print you that crown.
Yeah. The only
Tony popped in. He goes, really the only way is to draw a construction circle and make it tangent to the 3D spline.
Now, the other thing that you can do is you can view the 3D spline. So you can turn on what the minimum radius is. So if you know what the minimum radius is, you can see what the actual radius. I'll try.
But actually controlling that with a dimension is,
Yeah, you can.
because if you can attach part of it to that circle, but then the next part of the spline might violate the minimum. So then you're spending all day chasing that too.
Cool. All right. I think we got most of them, right?
There's only one on the anonymous side. We just need that person to maybe email us.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Just a little clarification on that and the other one.
And then Jordan wanted to know more about the equation for the 3D wavy strip part.
You have that spring steel part, you know, where you created the helix.
Yep.
Maybe get with Jordan on.
We can email you those parts if we need to. Those come straight out of the advanced part modeling.
Okay. All right. Maybe you have another Zoom meeting. Looks like it. Okay, well, let's close it now. I think we've been able to answer most of the questions. I thank you all for attending and participating. It was a lot of fun and also good for us to answer some of your questions and challenge us. So thank you. Everyone have a great afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Who exactly is the king of routing? Is that Stephen Darcy or is that Tim Strange?
Neither of them are going to claim it.
It goes back and forth.
Oh no! Oh no, it doesn't. Oh no,
They're
it
both
doesn't.
like,
I think it's
Crown
Tony
off.
Riggs. Didn't he make all the classes? I think Tony gets the crown.